Welcome to the Greenhouse Podcast, a podcast dedicated to bringing you real, honest insights about building businesses from people who are doing it too. I'm Jackie, and every week I'm going to be sharing the best bits from our Greenhouse speakers, as well as speaking to people just like you, small business owners, freelancers, side hustlers, entrepreneurs and startup founders who are going to be sharing the ideas that will help your business bloom. I'm really excited that in this episode we're going to hear from Yolanda Saez Castello. Yolanda is a Fortune 500 business leader and a London Business School graduate who, after realising her career was impacting her health, has moved into the wellbeing space to help other people take control of their wellbeing and resilience. So, let's hear from Yolanda.
Let's talk resilience. Like I was saying, we create prosperity. We get economies out of recessions. We create products, services that are useful, that people are helped by constantly. We're such a big part of the economic tissue in so very many countries. And it takes a special kind of person to do that. So in terms of, how do you stay resilient? What is resilience? Let's start with that. A typical definition would be to bounce back from adversity. To that, I would add, and from the daily stresses, because there's a lot going on in entrepreneurial life that isn't necessarily what you would label adversity, but it still requires that resilience, doesn't it? I think we're all familiar with what resilience looks like to each and every one of us. I'm really more interested in what is it not, because it can be quite misunderstood. And I'm here to tell you that one of the things resilience is not is gritting your teeth, toughing it out, pretending to be okay when you're not, pretending to be coping when you're not. All that leads, and I would know, all that leads to is burnout. It's not the way. Toughing it out is not the way. If you think you need help, if you think you need support, I'm here to tell you that's a sign of strength, not a sign of weakness. That's a huge misunderstanding. Another very common one is that we think we're stopping, but stopping or thinking we're stopping, which sometimes we aren't even, isn't the same as recovering. Most of us are permanently hooked to our phones. Our phone is, the extension of our hand. And if that is the case, how much are we really stopping? Even when we think we're stopping, we often aren't recovering. It's a very different thing. And let me introduce you, if you haven't heard of it, to a well-known concept in science called homeostasis. It was coined in the 30s by a physiologist, which is just a very highly trained medical scientist. And he coined the term of homeostasis. And all that means is that our bodies, our systems, have inbuilt mechanisms to bring us back to balance, to bring us back to health, to bring us back to well-being. That's inbuilt in us. But are we even giving our systems a chance? So no toughing it out, no continuing mindlessly. One of the secrets of resilience that I am very pleased to share with you is that principle of homeostasis, of really put in everyday words, not in physiologist terms. One huge secret of resilience is to try hard. Go ahead. I know the type you are. Try hard. Then recover. Then try again. That, if you think about it, can be quite different from the way many of us function, particularly when the weight of the enterprise sits on our shoulders, which is, the case for so many people in this room. So sometimes I say to my clients, when there's too much in your head, how about you head for your bed? Oh my goodness, how dare I take a break? How dare I take a break? I found it so hard to cancel a few sessions. For heaven's sake, I had coronavirus. So sometimes I have to take my own medicine. I'm quite aware of that. I'm one of you. I've got you. Or as Banksy, one of my favorite artists, said, when you're tired, learn to rest, not to quit. So how do you boost resilience? I'm going to give you my 5 favorite tips. How do you boost entrepreneurial resilience, which is a special type of resilience for no less a special type of person? I'd start by saying in my 5 favorite tips, I know some of you in the room are experts in this. I won't name names, you know who you are, and I love you all. I very often start with my clients with what I call an honest lifestyle audit. It is proven, we know it's proven, that you can eat yourself stronger, that you can sleep yourself stronger, that you can exercise yourself stronger. We know this is a fact. Whether we do it or not is a different matter. If you find, by the way, that you are self-sabotaging, because that's really common as well, if you find yourself sabotaging, I have excellent news for you in the next couple of slides. Okay? So you can definitely eat, sleep, and exercise yourself stronger, but you can also, and you may not be so aware of this, you can also fund yourself stronger. You can fund yourself more resilient. There was a huge study, a longitudinal study, meaning it went on for very many years, I think 16 years. And it followed thousands and thousands and thousands of people. And it showed that those who are more connected, those, by that I mean, I think they measured it literally by how much time they spent with their friends. Those who spent most time with their friends literally had a 50% less chance of dying across the length of the study, right? So don't feel guilty when you're just deciding to book that night out, or in, as the case may be these days, whatever it might be, okay? And like I say, I know you've got a workbook, around page 50 is where I am. Perhaps make a note about the eat, sleep, exercise, fun, and self-sabotage, because I can help with that, definitely. Okay? My second tip, I'll be quick with my tips, by the way, I'll be quick with my tips because there's one of them in which I will elaborate longer because it can help with all of the above. So, my second tip to you for resilience, to boost your resilience, would be probably a well-known one that we still keep ignoring. Control the controllables and save your energy on the rest. Your energy will be put to good use in many other ways. Don't worry about that. My third tip, if we're going to talk about habits, my third tip to you would be, how about we drop the habit of comparing ourselves to some little corner manicured version of somebody else's life? If we're going to compare ourselves, my tip to you would be, compare yourself to a different version of yourself yesterday. How about that? That can bring insights, that can bring development, that can bring progress. My fourth tip for you to boost your entrepreneurial resilience would be to identify your elephant in the room. Your elephant in the room might be different from somebody else's elephant in the room. And if you imagine you're in the proverbial meeting room, and if all you're doing is looking down, you're not going to see it, you're not going to notice it. Literally, imagine yourself stepping back and looking at the whole room of your entrepreneurial life. What's your elephant in the room? It's an elephant. It should be easy to spot. Are you the type that is attached to tech constantly and never disconnecting? There are apps that can help you with that. By the way, there's an app called Off Time. Perhaps make a note, have a look at them if you're interested. There's an app called Unplugged. I got this in a training I did at Yale University, and it's quite well proven that some people find them very useful to disconnect because they impose tech-free zones, they impose, airplane mode timings and things like that you might find useful. Make a note and have a look at them. Some of my clients find them very useful. Is your elephant in the room, your lack of self-care? Are you really believing this story that work is first, that your enterprise is first? It's got to be first. And you're simply not taking care of yourself and then expecting miracles, expecting unbound amounts of energy and resilience. Are your boundaries healthy boundaries? Have you found your boundaries and are you enforcing them? In fact, I'd go as far as to say, have you found your non-negotiables? You can't blame people for trampling over boundaries that you haven't even created or respect yourself. And like I say, I'd go as far as Professor Richard Jolly from London Business School always says, non-negotiables, not just boundaries. That's what we need and deserve as entrepreneurs.
What a fantastic clip from Yolanda. But before we talk a little bit more about that, I'd just like to mention Real Creative. The Greenhouse podcast is sponsored by Real Creative, and they're here to help brands stand out with scroll-stopping content. We're here right now in the Real Creative studio recording the Greenhouse podcast, and they're also going to be supporting us with our audio and video content for Greenhouse 2022. So if you're looking for video-first, scroll-stopping content, head to keepitreal.co.uk. What I really love about Yolanda's clip there is that she was talking a lot about how entrepreneurial resilience is its kind of own form of resilience too, right? As entrepreneurs, as people that are building businesses, a lot of what we do is about our emotional state. I don't know about you, but when I worked in a big corporate job, obviously some days you have good days and some days you have bad days and some days you have stuff going on personally that might impact you at work. But I wasn't really prepared for how much my emotions would be linked to my business when I started Inkblot and Greenhouse. Every single day is a bit of a roller coaster. You wake up in the morning and it can be amazing. And then by lunchtime, something terrible's happening and you feel really bad about it. And then you have a crisis of confidence at 4 p.m. and by 9 o'clock, it's the best thing in the world. So I think it's really important that if you're building a business, that you become very self-aware about that, about how closely your emotions, your resilience, your well-being is linked to your business, and that you take positive steps to make sure that when you're building that business, you don't have a detrimental impact on your own well-being. And that's easier said than done, right? But I know Yolanda shared some really amazing tips to help with that. And I think that for me, a lot of this has been about work-life balance. I think people talk a lot about this. If you work in a job where you work for somebody else, you think about work and you think about life quite separately. But when you're running your own thing, very often those lines kind of blur. And it becomes quite hard to find a good balance between work and play. So for me, my top tip would be to be really, really, really strict on those boundaries. I know for me, for example, I always take a Saturday off. That is my day with no work, no checking emails, no social media. I'm trying to get better at it. I don't always manage it, but it's really, really important that we have really, really firm boundaries in place. And there's also some other non-negotiables in my week. So exercise, sometimes I'll get really busy and everything will be going really well, or there's a lot happening with clients. So I'll tell myself that I can't possibly fit in going to the gym. But very often, if I let those kind of non-negotiable habits drop, that's when I feel more overwhelmed. That's when I feel less resilient. That's when I find it harder to keep on top of everything. Whereas if I take an hour out each day to go and get my exercise in, I find it actually boosts my creativity. It makes me feel better, and I actually get more done in the long run. Well, I'm going to be back next week wherever you get your podcasts. And if you'd rather watch the podcast on video, you can tune into YouTube too. If you're interested in getting involved in the Greenhouse community, we'd love to have you. So head over to Greenhouse Jersey on Instagram to find out what we're all about. And don't forget as well to leave us a little review. They really, really help the podcast, and it's a really nice thing to do. So thank you very much. And we'll see you next week. Thanks for tuning in.